So when you say the Father is God, the Son is God, the Holy Spirit is God, but then you say they're not three gods but one God.
The question that I had, and that's where I said, where does the concept of faith? Because but to us, it's one God in three forms. Again, I'm interested in this jinn because that seems to be almost like, is that like the Holy Spirit?
Almost like angels, Holy Spirit.
No, it's a different form of creation, but when it comes to God, one needs to have a coherent concept of God. So the Trinity or polytheistic understandings, they don't cohere in its concept. So when you say the Father is God, the Son is God, the Holy Spirit is God, but then you say they're not three gods but one God. That's where the contradiction is. So a coherent view would have to accommodate this logical problem of Trinity. I'm sure you know about the LPT. I mean, you should know very well. There doesn't seem to be a very good response or defense even by the philosophers. Even today they're trying to bring up different models. One last model I've read about, people talking about how the transitivity can be blocked by opacity or opaque context. I said, okay, look at all this creativeness, bringing in the idea of now God being divinely simple, the divine simplicity, and bringing these issues, trying to solve this problem and introducing another problem at the same time. So if God was whatever in his nature, do you think God would communicate something that we'll not be able to understand?
I do. That's kind of the question that I had, and that's where I said, where does the concept of faith come into the Muslim religion?
Yeah.
Because there are certainly things that we can't understand.
But there's a difference between faith by blindly accepting something which is incoherent, illogical, contradictory, or faith in which you are agreeing and accepting something that you may not see, but they're sensible, reasonable, intellectual, and so on. Right. There's a distinction there.
Correct.
So when I talk about the coherent aspect of things, see, there are many things about our absolute God which we finite, limited individuals would not be able to grasp and comprehend. So God knows our weakness and limitation. It will be unfair for God to convey something about him which we would not be able to understand, because that will be a failure of communication. God will only communicate to us what we're able to understand and comprehend. If Trinity was true and God communicated it, we should be able to understand it.
Right.
The fact that no one can understand it and it's called a mystery, right, is indicative of that it is not from God. It's not a true representation of God's concept.
Do you believe that's a fundamental flaw in Christianity?
Trinitarian Christianity.
Yeah.
The Unitarians are exempt from it.
Where I believe
Have you prayed?
Yeah, I just prayed.
Okay, so
where I believe that it's not a fundamental flaw, it's one of those things where I get it. It's God in physical form, God in spiritual form, but it's all one, right?
As we discussed previously, right?
When you say, you see, the problem is this.
I just don't see that as a fundamental flaw that makes me question.
Let me tell you why I find it very, very incoherent. When we say someone is God, we know what God is in our understanding. God is the most absolute, sovereign, self-sufficient, almighty, with no beginning, the creator of everything. So he's going to go to prayer and come back when you go to prayer. Yeah? I'll continue anyway.
I'm going to prayer?
Yeah, come back. Okay. So if you say the Father is God, you mean the Father is that self-sufficient, sovereign entity, eternal with no beginning, everlasting with no end, fullness of divinity, one absolute divine being. Not part of God, not 1/3 God, but fully, complete, whole, one God. That's what you would mean by God. So the Father is one of those things. He cannot be deficient in any way. What makes God God? So if you're fully complete, whole, divine God, how much of God are you? One God. So if Father is one God, the Son is another one God, Holy Spirit is another one God. That's 3 one gods. It's no longer part of them together make one unity. It's 3 gods working together in one government, one group, one institution, one whatever. Not one God. three gods in a unison. So it's not tritheism, it's triunitheism, right? But it's not monotheism. That's what I see it because of the very implication of your belief.
Sure. So let me ask you this: what is the Quran? And this is what does the Quran say about jihad? I don't understand.
The Quran says, do jihad with the Quran. So no Muslim will say, it means is you take the Quran and you start hitting people with it. So the concept of jihad is, linguistically, it means struggle. It means struggle in the path of God technically. So you can struggle to resist your temptation from oppressing others, enjoying others through rape and murder and so on, looting their wealth. That's your jihad, struggle against yourself. You can struggle against yourself from all the whispers that you get from your own self, from others, from your community, to be bad. So you try to rectify yourself to be good, to be virtuous, to be kind, compassionate, truthful, reliable, and so on. The political jihad is when the state takes that struggle to open up a land to convey the message of Islam to the people in which there was an obstacle in front of them, where they cannot just go to the people where, because the boundary, the state has a boundary. You need visas to go in, for example. I mean, in current modern states. So a political jihad is when the state goes with its armies on another, like what it did before, and invites them. Become Muslims and save yourself from the hellfire. If you don't want to become Muslims yourself, to those entities and elites he's talking to, then just step aside, let us go in so people can see Islam. If you then still become an obstacle, then face our army. Because you are becoming an obstacle to the true salvation for those people who are not, in a way, accessible to this truth. And this truth is being prevented by this obstacle that you are becoming. That's the political jihad. But in no way they can force the people to become Muslims. All they're doing is removing the obstacle to let Islam to be seen, and they can then say, accept it, or I don't want to accept it, I reject it. So you cannot force Islam to people, but the political entity was only a political force which was trying to remove that obstacle.
And if they don't willingly step aside,
face the army, Islamic army.
Right.
That used to be the status quo of all nation states in the past, where this is like an empire type things, where this is how people will go and conquer another land. Islam is conquering not for the land and the resources, it's conquering this land to open up the land to the people of the truth. So this is the only time in history where the people who are conquered, they join the conqueror in the next mission. When Alexander the Great went to India or near India or elsewhere, and when they left, people were like, now I'm relieved, it's gone. So when he came and he forced, not him, other conquerors and emperors, when they came, forcibly made people to become slaves or become their religion, following the religion and so on. When they left, people reverted back. Islam is the only exception in which, when it went, people joined them, and they joined to go and conquer other people to open up the lands. Not to force them to believe, but to invite them to believe. That's why the Islamic expansion is one of expansion of the heart and mind, not of expansion of simply just land and so on. Because what did Muslims do when they went, the Islamic army, when they went to the countries? They didn't take their land, they left their land with the people. You can cultivate, you can do and so on and so forth. But if you don't do it for after a certain number of years, for example, then you're wasting the resources. We can give it to someone else who can then utilize this particular land. There's a whole laws around this in Islamic law in which these kind of things are dispensed so that the resources are utilized properly rather than just left them for no reason.
So if those people choose not to believe, do they become the enemy?
No, they become the protected citizen. They call dhimmi, the protected citizen of the Islamic State, in which their life, their honor, their dignity, their religion will be protected. They don't have to go and fight to defend that land or conquer others. They are exempt from it by being a protected dhimmi, and what they call by giving certain compensatory tax in response to not expansion activities, by going into military conquest and so on and so forth. They can be exempt from that. But Muslims are not exempt, so they have to go.
So why is there so much violence attributed to Muslims or over in the Middle East? I mean,
You know what?
and again,
Excellent question.
from an American perspective,
Excellent question.
it all seems to revolve around the religion.
No, excellent question. I'm going to tell you why. If you go back, say, 300 years ago, in a place called Palestine, Muslims were in power. People were living within this particular area, Jews and Christians as well. They didn't have a problem. They were living in peace. When Europe was were about to massacre the Jewish people, they were fleeing to the safe haven with the Muslim lands. Whether it be in Spain or Morocco, whatever, they were going there. Their life was protected by the Muslims. What happened in the Middle East when the turn of power changed with the Balfour Declaration by the British and others and so on? They created this political instability and the mismatch of power and so on and so forth. That created an unfair, unjust regime in there where Muslims have become the ones who are now victims. Their lands being taken away slowly, and eventually the whole landscape changed that Muslims are now the minority with a little bit of land, everything else now taken by the occupying forces. So of course, of course. And of course there will be resentment. There will be anger. Because this is what happens. If someone comes to your home and you say, well, you know what? This is all mine now. Your bathroom is mine, your lounge is mine, your kitchen is mine. You know what? You can go to that shed and live over there. You would not feel happy. You will resist. So what they're trying to do in stopping that resistance, and just injustices happen already, but they want to even stop people from resisting. Initially, the Palestinians were resisting intifada that you know of by peaceful resistance. That didn't work. In fact, they were even more curved because of their resistance and so on. Then they had a political resistance with, some weapons and whatever they had, maybe initially with weapons and whatever they could get hand of. That's because that's their struggle for freedom and oppression. So in the Middle East, all this violence are happening because of this. And who created all of that? Not the Muslims. Muslims are the victims. There are other oppressors who are creating this form. And this has a ripple effect all over the world, where it seems like everyone is supporting Israel as a nation and not supporting the oppressed nation, the community who are Muslims, the Palestinians. Okay? So the Muslims are angry everywhere else as well.
So when you say oppressor, do you mean Israel?
The occupying force is the oppressor.
Right? Israel or Judaism? Or...
No. It has nothing to do with Judaism.
Right.
People who were Jews were practicing their Judaism in their own quarters, freely, openly, peacefully, in tolerance. Judaism is not the problem with the issue there. It's Zionism. Zionism is a religion in its own. It doesn't have to be, an atheist could be a Zionist. There are Muslim Zionists too, I hear.
So America and their relationship with Israel, that creates I don't know if I want to use the term hatred, but you've heard people call America the great oppressor.
People can have resentment and anger with America because it's siding with an oppressor. It's not only supporting the oppressor, it's facilitating the oppressor, it's safeguarding the oppressor, it's promoting the oppressor. So by doing so, when you glorify a terrorist, there's a law now that you are actually committing a crime because you are supporting, encouraging, promoting terrorism. America, with its support, is glorifying terrorism. So it's a criminal in the eyes of many people.
Right. So does the Muslim religion support the terrorist acts?
Of course not.
I don't know. No, I'm sorry.
Of course not. Of course not. Because Islam gives people the freedom to choose what religion they want to follow, right? If you want to accept Islam, fine. If you don't want to accept Islam, that's your choice.
But a lot of these acts are done in the name of Allah.
People when they take in their own hands to commit the acts of violence against innocent people, of course this is wrong. Islam doesn't condone any of that. If a country fights another country, you don't consider that terrorism, because one country is fighting another country, whatever the reason. But if you fight an innocent community, an innocent individual, or an innocent state, that is terrorism. So whoever does that, whether it's be Christians and Jews and Muslims and atheists, you're committing acts of terror and terrorism, which is totally not acceptable.
So, so in America, these acts of terrorism that, we hear are being done in the name of Allah, right?
Can I just switch back?
Yeah.
The acts of terrorism that America is committing
Sure.
for years and years, everywhere in the world.
Sure.
What are you as American doing for that? You seem to be focusing on the response to these terrorist acts.
No, I understand.
To understand why in this landscape you have these pockets of terrorism happening, you call it terrorism, this is a response to American aggression. So what are you as Americans, I suppose you're Americans, right? What are you doing to stop America from these aggressions? That will solve the problem for any of these pockets coming and committing here and there, blowing the Twin Towers and blowing this and that. That would stop there. Because before America did all of those things, did people go to America, or the Americans themselves start blowing up buses, trains and big buildings? It was never heard of. It's only when America has become the aggressor, certain people, which we don't agree with, are committing a tit-for-tat response.
Right.
So the solution is remove the aggression, so any resistance or counter-response that comes will be eliminated, will be prevented.
Right. So if all of that stopped, though, you don't believe that it's settled because you want your land back, right? In Palestine?
Palestine,
Yeah.
if the land has been taken away, if I take your land, your home,
I'm asking.
I'm trying to understand something. It's not my view. We're talking about a view of people who are sound in their rational judgment. If somebody has taken your land wrongly, what it is required is simply give the land back and say sorry, and that's settled. But if you saying, I'm not going to give you land back, then the problem will remain. That is the reality check that people need to have. Unfortunately, people are not thinking that way. They're thinking, how do we stop all this terrorist activity? Let's have prevent strategy in UK. Let's have X, Y, and Z. It is not going to solve the problem, because there will be a certain individual who will take on their own hands, out of their desperation, through their maybe emotional stance, not thinking rationally, and they commit something bad in response, which Islam doesn't agree with. But to prevent these kind of things are happening, you have to look at their grievances and you have to solve that problem. America, England are not doing that. In fact, what they're doing is trying to, there is a tap that's leaking. Let's put some sedative over it. It's never going to fix the problem. Put a pot underneath the dripping water. It's not going to solve it. Concentrate on the root cause. Eliminate the root cause.
What is the root cause in your?
No, not mine. You tell me, what is the root cause in Palestine? I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to ask you as an American, what is the root cause of problem in Palestine?
Occupied land.
Occupied land. I'm not going to say anything. You tell me. So occupied land of what? Who's the occupier and whose land is being occupied?
Well, and so I don't know all the history of, but I think from your
You should know.
I know.
I think this is a fair question, though. What you think of?
My view, not important. We are talking about
So then, why is our view important?
because you're America, because you're Americans, are not solving the problem. So you need to go and understand what the root cause is. So when you realize occupation, people's usurping and stealing people's land and so on and so forth, seems to be the problem that has caused all this tension around the world, give the land back to its owners, the real owners.
So
if it belonged to the Jewish people, give it to the Jewish people. If it belonged to the Christians, give it to the Christian people. If it belongs to the atheist people, give it to the atheist people. Give it to the owners who are the rightful owners of the land.
Right.
It so happened that it was the Palestinians who had the majority of the land. They didn't just simply sell it off, it was taken from them.
So when everybody was living in Palestine, cohabiting together, I think you answered my question. Who owned the land? Everybody owned their...
Go back before 1920s. Go back in the 1880s, for example, an arbitrary date. Look at the landscape, look at the map. Who were the indigenous or who were the people living there? Okay, not someone who's a tourist there, people who had their own lands. And you will see the answer. I'm surprised, not you, I'm surprised by the media brainwashing of Americans and Europeans that they didn't even know who's the occupying force and who is the aggressor and the victims. And that's why they never pressurize the government to make the right judgment. The government, with their own particular interest, they will do what they want to do because they have an interest. But if the people realize that that is wrong, they would have solved the matter a long time ago. So the people need to be aware, need to be educated. Unfortunately, the governments are not allowing people to educate it. There is a whole program of media brainwashing. Brainwashing to know who is the victim and who is the criminal. That's the problem. So we want to see that people to it. You know, like how many Americans, they don't consider the 9/11 is Muslim terrorists done it. They think it's a job by the government themselves, right? Many. The government calls them conspiracy theories. Why are they thinking that way? Why are they conspiracy theories? Is it because they're Of course not. Because the circumstances tells us something fishy going on. So these people are waking up. We want the general public to wake up to solve these problems of the world, and you will see that America will be a great nation in the eyes of people.
So, I understand and I agree that there is brainwashing. Let's say, I think, if I'm not mistaken, you might know, isn't Israel, like the Jewish people that are occupying Israel, isn't their argument that this was our land way farther back before?
Even before that, it was the original Palestinians and the descendants of them, the Arab Muslims. So they don't win even there.
Okay. So,
Yeah?
So what is their argument though? What is their like?
No, the Zionists have many arguments. They think whole of Saudi Arabia is theirs. The Iraq and Saudi Arabia, part of Iran and so on. That's the Zionist, the world view in their landscape. They want it all. Who gave it to them? God has already guaranteed that this is your land. Of course, this is not your land. If that was your land, what happened to it? So lands come and go. But what the Muslims in Palestine are saying, you, with all your sanity today, you're not like a primitive individuals in the past where it's all about like, hunting tribes, where you can hunt everything, not people and kill them all, loot everything and it becomes yours. Now you're human beings. You understand and appreciate the differences, whether they are, white or black, whatever. You want to live human beings.
Right.
So understanding us a bit more grounded on humanity compared to some other times. So they're saying, you have devoured our land, taken it by force. Okay? We're not talking about million years ago, it wasn't even yours to begin with. Like America was not for Americans. There was indigenous people. Give it back to them then. Right? So the question is not about this. Question is the oppression that is committed in the last few hundred years. That's where the problem is. The solution like one-state model, two-state model, so on, you can try all that mess. Unless you haven't addressed the grievance of the people, there is always going to be pockets of problems here and there. You cannot stop people. When injustice is being committed against any human being, sooner or later, they will rise up. Some strong from them, emotional from them will rise up. And they might do something which is not good. That's why we need to really make people not have these grievances. So, why do I have the right to mock you and your mother and your wife and your father and so on and so forth? Why do I have the right to insult you? I don't. But this is what the society is doing now. It's like, you know what? You can mock your father, your mother, your prophet, your God, and so on and so forth. If you mock my parents, I will be angry. I would not be happy. I would say, what are you doing? What's wrong with you? If you mock my God, who I love more than my parents, I would be even more angrier. So this is what's happening in the society, people doing this. Why they're doing this? In the name of freedom. That's not how you bring people together. That's the division that you make. That's the division you're trying to make. If you want to unite, look, Quran says, do not insult even other gods, lest they insult Allah back. So even there are other false gods, we are told not to even insult them. You can disagree and say, they're not worthy of worship, but we have no right to mock and insult. Like,
so wouldn't that be like, if you disagree with them, you say out loud, that God isn't real, our God is real. Couldn't that kind of be like an insult? Couldn't that be seen as an insult?
what is insult?
It's to the person can define it for themselves what an insult. There's no.
No. You can't just define whether you're a man
what
or
is an insult?
look. The current trend is you can define whether you're a man or a woman. I mean, can I define? Okay, I'm actually a dragon trapped in a human body.
No,
Why not?
because that's not how you are.
No. I am a dragon trapped. Hear the word trapped in a human body. I am a female trapped in a male body.
Okay. No.
That's the trend, right? You know the trend. That's what people are trying to. All this LGBTQ business and so on. You and I may disagree that this doesn't work with us. It doesn't work with us.
And to them, us disagreeing is an insult to them.
Now, how can that be? How can that be an insult? We are simply disagree.
We think it's an insult, but they think it's an insult. That's
Well,
what I'm saying. That's what
then
I'm
they
saying.
need to understand what insult is. Then
Well, and I think what he's saying
That's what I'm
is
saying. They see it as an insult. We do
no, it's not about seeing.
It's-
You need to understand what an insult is. Disagreement is not an insult. I can disagree with you on something. You can disagree with me on something.
Right.
That doesn't mean I'm insulting you or you're insulting me.
Sure. I agree.
But I do think, to his point, that I can tell you as, an even walking through London, right, that, with so many people in the Middle East that, it's like there's so much animosity because you're either white or American or whatever, right? And I think it's because, something as simple as believing differently, right?
The Middle Eastern people, if they do have this outlook about the American whites, that's a social conditioning created by the Americans themselves. So they're the ones to be blamed partly too, because they've created a social conditioning of a large number of people. If that is true, I'm taking your word for truth, and they have created experience. If they didn't have that condition, that will be removed. It's if, then this. This is the condition that's been created by the people themselves. So an insult is something that is derogatory, something that offends you in such a way that because I have made some ridicule, some mocking, something of that nature. Because if I say, for example, you are not an insult, but if I said you're ugly like a pig or something, I'm making derogatory statements. That is when you can say I'm making an insult.
So then, on that case, what if I just say you're crazy? Like I don't like. What if like someone out of their mind, like someone on the street who just obviously is not right in the head, they come up to me and say you're ugly, and I'm just like okay, and I walk away, unbothered, uninsulted, even though they said an insult, I'm uninsulted. Why is like
tell your wife you're ugly?
No, yeah, but again, like.
Would you? Right. He understands. Like I'm sure you might have been married for a number of years, and you'd know exactly what it means. Not say things which people will hurt. If I say I disagree with you, there's no reason for you to be hurt because I don't have to accept what you believe in. You don't have to accept what I believe in. But it doesn't mean I'm insulting you or you're insulting me. You have to make that distinction.
But to disagree is kind of in a way to say I'm right and you're wrong because I believe something else than you believe. I'm right, you're wrong.
That's not insult either. You can say I'm wrong, and I would not say it's an insult.
Okay. So
because that has nothing to do with an insult.
It's opinion. That's all. Sure. I mean, you can say that, but people, it's just such a
people who get offended saying this is an insult. They need a reality check.
Exactly. I'm not saying that it's just, but it's saying insult is just such a broad word. Like people can take anything as an insult. It's just hard to specifically define.
They need to understand what an insult is then, right? People need to, when we say, for example, something is good, you need to understand what good is. Because the good doesn't mean something that is smelling, foul. It has its own connotation conceptually.
Right.
The language that we're speaking, the words have meanings. Insult, what kind of meaning does it have? Meaning in the dictionaries?
No.
That, oh, it's okay for me to be insulted? Everyone says, no, I don't want to be insulted. And they might, by today's convention, give legal right to people like, it's okay for you to insult others. But we're saying we shouldn't have that right, okay? Because it's not a good thing to insult and mock and ridicule.
So you think things are, by that case, words are either good or bad? It's
No, there are neutral words.
There's neutral words?
Of course.
Okay. So I mean, I just want to make that understand. Okay.
Yeah. But insult, by its own conceptual understanding,
Okay. But
they're like, can I insult you? Do you think like, yeah, go ahead?
So
Then you think, what is this? What's wrong with this guy? He wants to insult me. Because you'd think insulting means to defame me, to have some certain words are. Can I say, for example, can I? Won't use this word, but something like negative, nice, like you are a rapist. Why would I say that? Is that a good thing to be associated with? Oh yeah, I'm a rapist. Hallelujah. No one would glorify that. No one would be happy and say, now let's celebrate it. Because a rapist, by this connotation, is someone who acts on their will and forced their will on someone else by force without their consent and so on. That's not a good thing. So insult, for example, should be taken in that way, like, why would you do that? So when it comes to religion, we can have our differences. You know the example I gave you about the coherency of the concept of God? We say God is so merciful to us that He has given us guidance to all nations, all times, because He's just. And all the nations, when the warners came to them, they had a clear understanding who God is and what they have to do to be saved from the hellfire that is there in the future. None of them, prophets, told them about, you know what, God is like a Trinity and then Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and God is like a half elephant and half man, and God is a black man called Krishna. And so, all of this from God. God will be always consistent in His message, because consistency is one. He hasn't. So when He conveyed His message to Abraham, imagine, Abraham in the day of judgment sees God on the throne, someone on the right hand side, and there's a Holy Spirit hovering. He will faint. I would faint if I was Abraham, because he was the friend of God, and God didn't tell him who he was, that he had a son as well. So this is what we are saying is, people often don't realize from historical transformation what happens to some of the truths. The truths gets corrupted. It's get changed over time. When Moses came, upon him be peace, he didn't tell the people to worship him. He told people to worship God. When Christ came, the son of Mary, upon him be peace, he didn't tell people to worship him. God. What happened? As time now, I hear Christians worship and so on and so on. Opening up to. They want to tell you to worship. He himself of worship. What a change of turnover of, it's like, a tragedy what has happened to human history. Who said to worship God only, people are now worshipping Him instead. So that's why we're saying is Christianity, in the Quran, they says they are dallin. They are into their misguidance. So to remove misguidance, to come to the truth, is to understand God as God has consistently throughout history has explained about who He was. One and only God, not three. The difference between 1, 3 in 1, 5 in 20, whatever. They're not equivalent. So Christians need to come back to the God of Jesus, the God of Moses, the God of Abraham. Then we will say, yes, you are now coming on track, and the next step is follow the final messenger. If you are a Jew and the messenger prophet Jesus came, your next Jew is to accept him as your prophet, as your messenger, and follow him so that you worship him to what he has brought through course God given to him. If you're a Christian, your next step is to know who the final messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You don't lose anything. You are now worshipping God as God who God is in his reality. So this is what we're saying. Islam is that only acceptable ideology, the message, the religion, the way of life that is acceptable to God. The religion of Jesus, Abraham, Moses, Muhammad, peace be upon them all. We're inviting you to that. You're not losing anything to become a Muslim, you're gaining everything.
And if we don't accept that,
then
we're a Christian, and
if
we're
you don't
American,
accept
are
that,
we your enemy?
you don't become my enemy because you don't accept something.
Okay.
If you don't accept,
I agree
you,
with but
you,
that's kind of what it
you
seems.
will have your consequences with God in the hereafter. If you are living in an Islamic country, then you are a non-Muslim citizen in an Islamic country. Back in the past, where Islam was implemented, protected citizen, in which your life, your honor, your dignity. Don't have an Islamic country where Islam is implemented, and that's why somewhere, some places, the Christian minority may be oppressed. And I don't disagree with you that that might be the case in some places because they are not implementing Islam. That's why people may get oppressed. Muslims are getting oppressed in the Muslim countries themselves. Let the other minorities who are non-Muslims.
So what are the sect of Muslim where people are killed, right? For their beliefs. I mean, right?
You have no right to kill someone for their belief just because they have a different belief,
what
right?
are those? They claim to be Muslim. They claim to follow Allah.